Welcome to the New Heights Show on Education. I'm Pamela Clark, founder and director of the New Heights Educational Group, and I'm here with David Smith, the founder of Silicon Valley High School, who has helped us get these podcasts produced and delivered to you.
Yes, Pamela, when we saw the great things that you and your army of volunteers were achieving at New Heights, we wanted to get involved. We're happy to work with you to leverage the internet and make quality education accessible and affordable to everyone, everywhere.
Thank you, David. We appreciate Silicon Valley High School helping us to get these podcasts out to the hundreds of thousands of listeners from all over the world. So I hope you enjoy the show.
In this week's episode, we will discuss education reform on mission.
Hello, everyone. This is Danielle Washington coming to you live from Ms. Buffy Williams' office. We're just sitting around thinking about life and trying to become better people tonight, so check us out. Welcome back. You're on the air with Buffy Williams, and you have been listening to the New Heights Show on Education. We have been discussing the show's purpose on mission.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Buffy Williams, and you're listening to the New Heights Educational Group, the New Heights Show on Education. And tonight's topic is multimedia in education. And I would like to do a recap on last week's episode. We have come to the episode 29, and on last week we discussed careers in education, and we used the Department of Labor's sponsored site, the ONET Online. And on tonight's topic, we're going to take a deeper look into multimedia learning and multimedia in education. So join in the discussion with us and call us at 917-948-7542. Or put your comments in the chat, or use the hashtag on social media, NHEG. Or as always, post your comments on Twitter at Buffy_Awaken, or on Spreaker, Instagram, or YouTube. Remember, my fellow New Heights host, Erica Hansen's show airs on Thursdays at 2 o'clock p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 1 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Before I forget, next week's episode will be our comic book issue 4, and we hope that you join us for that. But when we're thinking about multimedia education and multimedia learning, we know that, the virtual classroom and technology in education has impacted education in a number of different ways. We have the ed tech boom, which is essentially the integration of technology within education. And it's stated that the reason for the multimedia learning, and there is a theory, a cognitive theory of multimedia learning by Mayer, and it's simply that people learn better from words and pictures than with words alone. And it's not just enough to, as the research will tell you, it's not just enough to just add the words to the pictures, but you have to actually do some type of integration with that. So it's like 3 major assumptions that come along with that. One is that, of course, there are 2 separate channels for learning, auditory and visual, for processing information. And then the second is that those channels have a limited capacity. And the third is that the learning is an active process of the mind filtering the information, selecting the information, organizing it, and then integrating that information into a tangible means of processing. And so when we look at why the ed tech boom has been so popular, researchers have, looked more deeply into the way that people learn through words and pictures, and how does it better enhance the learning process using those channels of dual coding, auditory and visual learning. And then, processing the amount of information by simply presenting the material in a way that allows the learner to connect it with other aspects that they've already learned. And so when teachers are looking at multimedia education, and especially now in the world we're in right now, thinking about many students having to finish the last part of their academic year in a virtual environment, and looking at enhancing multimedia and teaching in the K through 12 area and in the post-secondary area as well. We have become more creative in the ways that we deliver information to our learners, and it just helps to guide the learner through pictorial information, and it makes it more relevant when the student can actually process that information, and it reduces the load of single processing if you can attach it to a memory of something that they've already experienced. And so learning through pictures and words and different modalities is a way for students to be able to process it more effectively, because there are three possible outcomes, right, for learning. So we have one, of course, there's no learning that takes place, which means that the student has poor retention and there was a poor transfer of the actual information, or poor performance, which means they can't actually demonstrate that they've learned the information. And then you have rote learning, which indicates that they have good retention, they can retain the information, but then they have poor transfer of that information when they actually have to perform it, because they're just learning it from memory. And then you have meaningful learning, which speaks to there's good retention, and then there's a good transfer performance, which means that the student can actually demonstrate to you that they've learned that information. And there are evidence-based principles that go along with this. And I should also note that my sources for today are Cambridge University, the University of London, and the University of Boston. And making sense of what this means for us today in the world of technology, and some of the big takeaways of why is it that we have chosen to use so many forms of media, and trying to integrate that within the classroom and implementing it in a way that teachers can enhance the learning process, and it can increase the interaction between the students and the teachers and the lecture itself. And so there's a source of information delivery for students learning that students will be able to utilize these resources over and over again, depending on the type of multimedia that the teacher chooses. And so when we look at what is characterized as multimedia, it could be anywhere from the presence of text on pictures, it could be sound, it could be animation, it could be videos. And we know that we've talked about the rise in interest in technology and education and the boom of the ed tech era. And so some of the benefits have been, a deeper understanding of the actual material, because there's a deeper connection with past experiences and past things that they've learned, and then they can integrate that in. And then also it improves their ability to problem solve, because a large percentage of the brain is dedicated to visual processing. So if they're visual learners, then they can attach that to some type of memory or some type of learning that they've had in the past. Then that, of course, is a benefit to their learning process. And then it also increases their positive emotions, because students, they have a better attitude about the learning process, and they're usually more proactive because it impacts their mood, because they actually can feel like they've actually retained the information and they actually understood it, because they're processing it in a way that they better understand it. And then also it gives them access to a variety of information, because students have computers, tablets, smartphones, and internet, and students, it's a more convenient way of actually accessing the information that they need, so they feel more confident. And even if they don't know the answer, that if the teacher allows them to use that technology to do research, then they can use reputable sites, and they can use reputable research and links that are allowed within the classroom to be able to extract the information, and then have an open discussion about the source and where the information came from and how it integrates into the learning process. And then it also gives them an opportunity to explore the world. And, it's no surprise that students explore more about learning, especially if it's related to geography or different cities that they may never have been to, or mountains or jungles and places that, they might not necessarily ever visit, but they can do that virtually in a virtual world and explore planets and space. And, the possibilities are endless with that. And then also it gives them the opportunity to, look at, rare animals and things like that within the biology areas as well. And so when you look at the massive open online plethora, I would say, of multimedia, and you think about the different softwares that teachers are able to access, that classroom time is used more effectively, and students are better prepared, because it also ties into when we talked about flipped classrooms, in that students, they come to class better prepared because they've actually been able to watch the video of the teacher or whatever multimedia there is out there, and maybe they didn't understand a particular part. Or I know some of us have had those instances where you're in a lecture or you're in a classroom, maybe something distracts you, or maybe you didn't quite hear what the teacher said, and then maybe you were attempting to ask the teacher to repeat something, then the bell rings or something happens, or you go to lunch and then you don't get to ask that question again. But in this particular format, if they didn't hear something or something, they got distracted by something, they could very simply just rewind the video and hear that lecture again. Or if they didn't quite retain everything in the video, they could also play that back and hear that again. And so it enhances that process. And then any areas that they're having difficulties with, they can come to class and just focus in on those particular areas. And so we're talking about multimedia education and multimedia in education tonight. And I'm your host, Buffy Williams, and we're going to take a short pause, and we will be back after the break.
Right now, you might be struggling through your classes or even failing them. You might be worried that you may not finish high school. There might have even been a thought that you may not be smart enough. Well, the New Heights Educational Group begs to differ. We not only think you are smart enough, but with our help, you will complete your high school diploma. The New Heights Educational Group strives to improve your academic success through its tutoring services. To learn more,